Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video we are going to discuss difficult situations with opening moves. Now this will most probably not be the only video where we are going to discuss that. Very soon in the next few future videos I'm going to be starting to play games right through. Obviously difficult situations will arise from those games, which we will focus on in the videos after that. But I just want to give you an idea in this video of difficult situations you can have with opening moves. Now, I'm not talking about a situation where you get first roll because, well, if you get first roll, in the previous two videos to this one, that is the fourth and fifth videos on this channel, I've explained how to play, the best way to play all the possibilities of the roll of the dice. I've explained how to play all possibilities, so please refer to those two videos if you're not sure. But in this one I'll be mentioning a few examples of difficult situations with opening moves where you had the second roll of the dice, where your opponent had first roll of the dice, then you had the second roll of the dice. So, for instance, well, we'll discuss some situations that are not so difficult and then discuss ones that are much more difficult. Just as an example, imagine if your opponent rolled a double 4 and played 1, 2, 3, 4 here, 1, 2, 3, 4 there, which, as discussed in one of the two previous videos, that is the best move for a double 4. Then you roll a 3 and 1 straight away. So double 4 was the first roll that your opponent had, then straight away you roll a 3 and a 1. Well, normally with a 3 and a 1 you'd use these two checkers to prime here, but now you can't do that. So that is frustrating. I sympathize with that. And you know, you played backgammon long enough and the situations that we're going to discuss in this video are going to happen to you eventually at some point. So look, it is frustrating that you can't prime here, but a 3 and 1, well, you now have to resort to, let's say, playing a 3 here and a 1 here, for example, or just moving this checker 4 spaces. But you know, my personal preference is 3 and a 1. Won't make much difference. It's good to get these two checkers close together to possibly prime up here, or even run with one of these checkers. So you know, that's what you would do with a 3 and a 1. Now, similarly, imagine if your opponent rolled a double 3. Again, as discussed in a previous video, double 3 on your first move, the best move is to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 and prime off here. Again, for the full explanation, go to the fourth video on this channel where I discuss what to do if your first roll of the dice is a double. I discuss all doubles in that video. But imagine if your opponent didn't do that. Imagine if your opponent went 1, 2, 3 and let's say 1, 2, 3 with these two checkers, or 1, 2, 3 with these two checkers, neither of which move I would recommend. But imagine if he did that. We'll just use this one for argument's sake, and then straight away you roll a 4 and a 2. Again, you can't prime here because that's already blocked off, and this is rather awkward even here because, well, 4 and 2, you can't move this checker to a spot, so really the only thing you can do is go 1, 2, 3, 4 and then 1, 2. That's the safest move you can make in that situation with a 4 and a 2, because, I mean, you don't want to move any of these checkers 4 or 2 spots because you'll be giving your opponent a free hit here. So really, to leave these checkers on their own, that's the least riskiest move you can make in a situation like that. And similar to what I just discussed with a 3 and a 1, people feel frustrated they can't prime off here. Well, you know, again, play backgammon long enough, this kind of thing will happen. don't let it bother you, just play that move there. But then we get into slightly difficult situations, like for instance, if your opponent rolls a 6 and a 1. So your opponent rolls a 6 and a 1 as his first roll, then you roll, for argument's sake, a double 3. Now, you can't prime off here with a double 3, but because your opponent has anchored off on a key prime point here, you would be smart to advance these two checkers as far as you can to be able to escape. So then you would go 1, 2, 3 with the first it's a double 3, so with your first two checkers you'd go 1, 2, 3 there. You've covered a major priming point here, and if your opponent primes again here as well, you're pretty close to escaping. So considering that this key priming point is anchored off, you're smart to move these two checkers 3 spots here. Or some people might say, look, why don't you just move these two 3 spots there, then 3 spots onto there, and anchor off here just like your opponent has. That's not too bad either. That's not too bad. But yeah, personally, I would be inclined to advance these. You know, I do like that move, I must say, because your opponent has primed, you have primed. There is a lot of merit with that, because now by priming here, you can also, you've got a 1 spare checker here to prime here with a 3 and a 1, or here with a 4 and a 2. Whereas your opponent can't do that anymore. So that is, again, your personal preference. That is a fairly good move. So really, your opponent's anchored, you've anchored, but you would also be smart to advance these 3 checkers here. But the problem with that is you can't really go 1, 2, 3, because if you do that, you've effectively buried those 2 checkers. You're not on a key priming point. Your key priming points are really here. So then you would be left with going 1, 2, 3 here. And again, that's not a key priming point, because excuse me, your key priming points are here and also here, not necessarily there. So although you would be smart to advance these 2 checkers here, my personal preference in a situation like that with a double 3 is to prime, because as I just explained, your opponent's primed a key point here, you've primed off the same key point here, but you've got a spare checker here, he hasn't, so you've got a slight advantage there. And then after that, unless you get a 3 and a 1 or a 4 and a 2, I would concentrate on trying to get those 2 checkers advanced and or get them out of there, because it's already been primed here, as would your opponent with these 2 checkers. So that would be my preferred move on a double 3 in this situation. Now, again, if your opponent has rolled a 6 and a 1, so there's a 6 and a 1, and you get a double 4, well, that's much better than getting a double 3, because it doesn't stop you from playing the standard double 4 movement, which is double 4 there and double 4 here. Excuse me, that's your standard double 4 move, which a 6 and a 1 has not stopped you from playing. Now, the other thing is, what if, talking about double 4s, what if your opponent rolls a 3 and a 1, and then you roll a double 4? I mean, if you roll a double 3, it's perfectly okay, because again, you can play the standard double 3 here. But what if you roll a double 4? You can't go double 4 here, so that move's gone. You first move a double 4 here, and I know it's frustrating that you can't advance those 2 checkers 4 spots there. Now, what a lot of people will then do is go 1, 2, 3, 4, which is a terrible move, because you've just buried those 2 checkers. and you've taken spare checkers off here, which could have been used to cover key priming points here. So that's a bad move. But since you can't move double 4 there, you will then move these checkers again another 4 spots, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. You've primed off a key point here, you've anchored a key priming point here, plus you've got this spare checker to possibly do a 4 and a 2, or a 6 and a 1 here. So you've kept that checker there, which is still pretty good. So do excuse me, please. So that's really the best you can do with the double 4 if this point has already been anchored here. But see, we've discussed, you know, if your opponent rolls a 3 and a 1, 4 and a 2, 6 and a 1. But what if your opponent rolls a double 6 as a first move? If your opponent rolls a double 6 as a first move, as a first roll of the dice, I should say, there's your standard play for a double 6. Now, if you roll a double 4, for example, that's no problem. You can still play the standard double 4 here and here. You've primed off a good point here. Now, his 2 checkers are already out. Remember, double 6 is the dream first roll. So, really, you're priming. If you prime any of these key points here, you're priming it in case you do a hit later. That's the only reason you're priming it, because his checkers are already out. These 2 back checkers, because he's rolled a brilliant double 6. So you can still play the standard double 4, and at least you've advanced those 2 checkers so that you've covered a key priming point here. So he's primed there, but he can't really trap you in anymore. So double 4 is not too bad there. But then, what if in a double 6 situation, a double 3 is a bad roll for you? Because remember, with a 6 and a 1, as we discussed, with a double 3, you could move those 2 checkers here, which you can't with a double 6. So with a double 3, well, again, I would not recommend moving those 2 checkers here, because, as I said, you've kind of buried them. You're not covering key priming points. You only have 1 spare checker there now, not a few. So it's disadvantageous. So, and you, like I said, you can't move there. You can't move these 2 checkers 6 spots there either. I mean, he's rolled a double 6. You know, so it's going to be disadvantageous for you rolling a double 3 in response to a double 6. So really, the only thing you can do is move, well, the only feasible move that I can see is move these 2, 1, 2, 3. As I said, you would not advance those 2, 3 spots, but you've got to make the best of a reasonably bad situation. Look, the glass is sort of half full, because at least you've advanced those 2 checkers slightly, so you're not so badly blocked in anymore. And really, if you don't want to bury those 2 checkers, which you shouldn't, you can move those 3 here. They are not on a key priming point, but at least you have 1 spare checker here to be able to prime later if these 2 checkers move, and then you do a hit and you anchor off here. You've still got that checker to do it with. And it's not on a key priming point, but you've really made the best of a kind of a bad situation. So it's not a total disaster. But then, again, if we go back to a if we go back to a 6 and a 1 move, where your opponent rolls a 6 and a 1, excuse me, if your opponent rolls a 6 and a 1, what if you roll a double 6? Now, double 6 is the dream roll as your first roll, but not if your opponent's rolled a 6 and a 1. It suddenly becomes a little bit of a nightmare, because You can't move those 2 6 spots. You can't move these 6 spots, not that you would. Even if you could, because you'd be burying checkers here. There is no way you're going to move these 6 spots, because again you'd be burying the checkers here, and you need these checkers there to prime off here later, so you would not move those. So what other choice do you have? Well, you could go double 6 here, but you can't move these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you wouldn't, even if this was empty, you wouldn't do it because you're burying these 2 checkers. So you can't move those, you can't move those, not feasible to move those. So what are we left with? Well, it's very rare that you would move 4 checkers. When you get a double, it would be very rare for you to move 4 checkers from the same point, but that's what you're stuck with right now, really, because you have to move those 4 here. Now the advantage with that is that that gives you an excellent priming situation. You can prime with a 3 and a 1, you can prime with a 2 and a 1, you can prime with a 3 and a 2. So you've got plenty of checkers for priming here, but you've got a problem checker there. Tough break. You didn't have a choice. You had to do that. I mean, there's no way to avoid leaving a checker on its own, because even if you had moved these 3 checkers 6 spots, which is a suicidal move, you'd have to still move this checker here, where you'd be leaving it all by itself. So instead of making a terrible move like moving these 3 and then leaving a checker here, instead of doing that, a much better move in that situation would be to move these 4 checkers here, leave that one on its own. Very tough break. Like I said, for your opponent to roll a double 6 and for you to straight away roll a double 6, I mean, what we're discussing in this video rarely happens, but play backgammon long enough, it'll happen. So, sorry, in this situation where your opponents roll a 6 and 1, I should say, and you roll a double 6. I made a mistake with what I just said, but anyway, again, these situations are rare, but they will one day happen to you. But although you can prime here fairly easily, you've got to concentrate on getting that checker the hell out of there and somewhere here, because if your opponent rolls a 1 with his next roll, if I was playing white and I rolled the 1, I would hit, because if you hit, this checker ends up here. There's no way he can hit that checker again there, because it's impossible to roll. I mean, if you roll the double 6, well, you can't hit it with a double 6 because the 6 is blocked off here, so you can't go 6, 6 and hit, and you can't roll a 5 and a 7 because dice doesn't have a 7. So it's impossible for that checker to be hit again. So if it was me, I would hit that checker and send it back here. And if per chance, that checker got back in and I could not cover that checker, per chance if I couldn't, and I got hit there, no problem, because if that checker ends up here, well, there's 3 of my opponent's checkers there and 3 of my checkers here. So it'd be worth taking the risk of hitting that one with a 1. So that's what I mean. You've got to concentrate then on getting this checker the hell out of there and bringing it somewhere here to a safer spot. Not here or here, you can still get hit, but somewhere safe. So really, if your opponent rolls a 6 and a 1, you roll a double 6 straight away. This is all you can do. Double 6 would not be your dream roll, it would be your nightmare roll in that scenario. But then, here's pretty much the worst possible scenario for an opening move in backgammon, and I say worst possible scenario because I can't think of anything worse. And I'd hate to repeat myself again and again, but play backgammon long enough, this will happen to you one day. Your opponent rolls a double 6, so there's a double 6, right? And then, as rare and ridiculous as this may sound, it does happen. You straight away roll a double 6. That's where a double 6, your potato becomes your poison. What are you going to do with a double 6? Now, You can't move that 6 spots. You can't move those 6 spots. You can't move them 6 spots. But you have to play the dice. So the only thing you can do, and you must play what the dice gives you, even if the dice rolls in a certain way where the only move available to you is a bad move and no other move is available, you have to play that. That's the rules of backgammon. So in a situation like this, I have to play the double 6. Can't move any checker 6 spots except these 3. So I must move these 6 spots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have now buried 3 key checkers. That's a key priming point. One of these checkers could have been used to prime off points here. Your opponent's checkers, 2 back checkers are freed. Even if you do a hit and one of these checkers goes back here, you got Buckley's chance of priming. You can't prime anymore unless you get a double. And even then, if you get a double 1, for example, you prime here, well, you can't prime anymore because you have no spare checkers here. You've only got 1 spare checker here, but no spare checkers here. So really, a double 6 followed by a double 6, it's just a disaster situation. You can't prime here anymore. It's difficult to get those two checkers out. So what I would do in a situation like that, if I was playing black, would be to concentrate on getting these 2 checkers the hell out of there. You can't prime, your opponent can. Your opponent's got spare checkers here where he can prime, and 1 spare checker where he can bring it here and prime later possibly. So I would concentrate on running with these 2 checkers as quickly as possible. And this for black has effectively become a running game, because the only way black can have any hope of winning this game is in a running game. He can't prime anymore. These 2 checkers are gone. Very little hope of priming here. Very little hope of priming there. Even with if he rolls a double 5, he can prime there, for example. But then he'd have to bury these 2 checkers here. It's just a disaster situation. So you can't concentrate. If you're playing black in a situation like that, on the very first roll of the dice, your game is in trouble because your opponent's rolled a double 6, so have you. Very, very tough break. If this happens to you, please go and buy a lotto ticket that day, because you've run out of all your bad luck. You can only have good luck. So yeah, it's really a running game for black. That's the only hope he has of winning that game. Well, when I say the only hope, it's unlikely black's going to win this game from this point on. But if you end up in a situation like that, try to make it a running game. That would be my advice. As I said, in future videos, as we play games, when difficult situations come up, we'll concentrate on shorter videos where we discuss difficult situations that arise from other games and possibly from opening moves. But I hope this has given you a fairly good idea of how to kind of improvise and what to do in difficult situations. So I hope this has been of some help. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.